live from downtown Mill Bay. And connected. If you did not get the biology package last time, coming up. Anybody else? What? You weren't here. Anybody else? No. Okay. Oh.
That's 6 weeks, not bad. It's not just good. Oh, it's so good, bro. 16 hours. That'll be so good.
Paying attention. I forgot. We finished last time our chemistry unit, so everybody can come up and claim one science sticker. These are vinyl. These are cute little forest animals. And I have little circles here of some kind. Oh, there we go. Here. One for now, because I have to give them to all the classes. But you are the first Science 10 class, so you get first choice. There's also little furry creatures, but they're not vinyl, so they won't last long.
They're all different.
There are some duplicates. I found some duplicates. But they're fairly good. And some of them are just random. I found a new source, and it turns out these are the stickers of affliction.
Have we gotten our cumulative one?
I released it. Did I not? I marked it. On Zipper.
What the fuck? Oh, it's like in the green.
Sorry, yeah, usually that's in the area, but I'll hopefully change it for more important. We got like first choice.
Where do I see shit if that was
Well, that's just the one you gave me. Basket. Perfect. Okay, biology workout. Last day, I've been reliably informed. My notes apparently crashed. I don't have our original notes, so I've got these from last year. I believe we did this whole page. I think I did that in all the classes. We talked about Watson and Crick. We talked about Rosalind Franklin, who did the X-ray for it. We talked about the cool little experiment in which a mouse lives or dies, but also showed that DNA was responsible, giving the rise to the first idea that DNA is coding for life. And we talked about the structure of the overall DNA molecule and its single component that makes it, and how they bond. A bonds to T, C bonds to G, so you should have the same percentages of both. And then I think the last thing we did is you drew it and labeled it. Good? Good. Good. Did we draw it and label it? Yeah. Good. Did we do this? No. Okay. Then, in that case, let's sure I don't do that kind of bonding. And grab the structure. This is unfortunate. I didn't mean to print that on it. So that's supposed to be in a slightly different spot because here is where the nucleotides bond. And for those of you that are going on in chemistry or indeed biology, that's known as hydrogen bonding. It's not a full covalent or ionic bond. It's a type of bonding that we haven't discussed before. And they have something called hydrogen bonding. Hydrogen bonding is when you have hydrogen with something really, really negative, and then you have something else kind of negative over here. It could be, often it's an oxygen, so that could be a hydrogen there. This becomes slightly positive, and this becomes slightly negative. And you get an area called a hydrogen bond. They're temporary. They don't, they're not permanent necessarily, but if you get enough of them in a row, they can hold something together. So it holds DNA together, but it's also weak enough to be unzipped because it's not a permanent bond. Does anybody know what this symbol is? Pardon? Oh, the sugar is right here. I mean this symbol. Does anybody know what this symbol is? That's a delta. That's an uppercase delta. So in the English alphabet, that eventually became a D. So this would be a lowercase delta, which became a lower D. And so when you see a formula in science, when you see a big delta, what does that mean? Change it. So this is a big change. So when you see a lowercase, it means a small change. It's tiny. So when I make a little delta and a plus, it means it's not a full +1, it's just like this. Hydrogen bonds, these are actual bonds between carbons. They're fully bonded, they're not going to come apart. They're married, whereas these ones, they're just flirting. It's holding your paper together right now. Your paper fibers are not glued together. It's just hydrogen bonded, which is why if you put it in water, water has hydrogen and oxygen, H2O. That will disrupt the hydrogen bonds because it will hydrogen bond to the water instead, and that's why your paper falls apart. Plastic is not affected by hydrogen bonding. That's why we have those. There are 4 different types of bases in DNA from last day. What are they? Adenine. Anybody know for T? Thiamine. What just happened? C? Someone else? 4 the same. Cytosine. I should probably ask, do you do this in Meta? You didn't build the DNA molecule in Meta?
We did.
Oh, okay. You did build the DNA, but you didn't learn the names of the parts.
We did.
You did? Okay. And the last one, guanine. Is anybody going, I think there's a fifth one? Uracil. Why isn't it up here?
Because it's only in RNA.
Excellent. And we're discussing DNA. So there is a fifth one, but we're not going to talk about it quite just yet. Also, when I asked you ATCG, they were all right here. And that's to give you a sense of what they actually look like. And you can see their bonding pattern in the right-hand corner. There, we have G there, and C, and this is, make sure I get it the right way around, T and A. And so they don't fit. So if G tries to go with A, it's just not going to quite work. They're not going to fit quite right. And that's how we can differentiate in the molecule one from the other. So they always match. I'm going to belabor the point by writing it again. Now, there's a variety of ways to remember this. Does anybody have a mnemonic they use that they like? Okay. A student told me they liked Colgate, which I'm like, that's a pretty big word. And they're fairly far apart, but it does put them in the right order. And I don't even know why this one works. Because it seems even longer. But apple tree. And car garage. You could also use, but my favorite way is I just look at them and I go, look, they're so round. Of course they fit together. They just snuggle up right together. They just fit right in. We've got the big spoon and the little spoon. And for this one, they're pointy. And the A would just sort of lean into the T and it would just fit all together. Perfect. I don't even know how you could see it any other way. This has a particular name. Because they're not opposites, but they are complementary. Complementary base pairing. Oop. I was a little fast there. And I need that for longer? That's not what it was. There we go. Where do you find DNA? Last year. Organelles. Nucleus. If you're clever, you know one more spot. Nucleolus is where we make ribosomes, but that is also in the nucleus, so it still counts. No, nucleus is one. There's one more organelle in your cells where you'll find DNA.
Oh,
Mitochondria. Um, uh, um, a fleshy biologist would probably be a little upset with me, like it's not a separate organism. It's not even a symbiote anymore because it's evolved with it so much. But as a biochemist, I'm like, it's basically its own organism. It has its own DNA. It reproduces on its own. It's inside your cells. It's just helping you along. You have a little symbiote. It's called the powerhouse of the cell. That's why if you want to trace your maternal line, you just look at your maternal mitochondria because you get them all from your mom. So your mom gave you all your mitochondria because she gave you every single organelle that you have. So you can actually separate out your genetic history in that way. But for every other thing, it's the nucleus. What's this fancy word for cell division? Mitosis. There's mitosis or mitoses because that's what you use when you grow your mitoses. There you go. You have to duplicate your cells, and that's how you get bigger. You get bigger not by having bigger cells, but by having more cells. This is why, if you're like me and you are large, you have an increased risk of cancer because you just have more cells, so you bought more tickets. And there's more cells, there's more chance that one of them's going to go bad. It's also, I made the joke the last day, if you took out the DNA out of your cell and you spread it out into a length that would be 2 meters long, if you took out the DNA in all of your cells and stretched it out, you would die. It's not a long continuous strand. It's wrapped up into separate little areas. What are those separate little things called? Nucleotides are the separate little parts of DNA. But when DNA is wrapped up, it's wrapped up into a structure. It's one of the smallest organelles. Double helix is what DNA is. Yeah. Starts with a C. Ooh. Chromatin is a form of it. It's chromosomes. But chromatin is a form of chromosomes. Chromatin is when it's wound up in a particular way. Because so you have nucleotides. Nucleotides join together to make DNA in a double helix. The double helix is in a wound string called chromatin that itself winds up to make chromosomes. You have to pack those 2 meters into a single cell. There's a lot of wrapping going on. How many pairs do you have? 40? 46? Oh, we do have 46. 46 is close. We have 46. I like to say it as 23 pairs because they're not duplicates, but they're homologous because you get one from your mom and biological mom and one from your dad, biological dad. Unless we're going to do some cool things later and start mixing and matching chromosomes. Growing babies to spec. Well, I mean, currently you have to get like half your chromosomes from your mom, half your chromosomes, but they're numbered 1 through 23. You could get chromosome 1 from you, chromosome 2 for you, chromosome 3 from you. Like you could individually pick them out, put them into an egg that's primed like a fertilized egg. So just get an egg, pull its chromosomes out, put all of your chromosomes in, and we would have a baby that was related to all of you. We can't do that yet, but we can almost do that. That's like, ha ha, ha ha ha. I could just take one of my chromosomes out, and when eggs get processed at some sort of fertility clinic, just make sure at least one of my chromosomes is in every one. And then I'd be everybody's dad. I don't know. It'd be like I owned everybody. That sounded wrong when I said it. So, in fact, that conversation went in a bad turn. I'm going to stop. There are people in the world who have a huge number of children. I think the world record is actually currently facing trial because he was in a fertility clinic, and rather than buying the chromosomes, he just used his own because it was cheaper.
How does that work?
When you want some chromosomes, you go to a clinic that other men also go to that sell their chromosomes.
Oh.
Oh.
Have you watched Ted?
I have not watched Ted.
Ted 2?
Does Ted do that?
Yeah. I think no.
That sounds like the kind of thing Ted would do.
No, he tries to buy some
Oh, he tries to buy.
for his wife.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because he's a giant talking bear.
Yeah, he doesn't have.
And if he did, he'd have the wrong number.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is, actually, on this, there is a persistent urban legend, biochemical myth. There's a particular bonobo that was thought to be a human-chimpanzee hybrid. As in, its mom was a chimpanzee, but its dad might have been human, because it did weird things. It had less hair than normal. It liked to walk around on its hind legs. It really liked certain TV shows. It preferred the company to humans, to other chimpanzees. And so some people were like, is this a chimpanzee or is this like part human? It would be, now, anytime it came up to scientists, because the newspapers would report it, and any scientist would go, like, no, there's no possibility. And then the newspaper would go, like, who knows, though? It really, there can't be. Because we have 23 pairs. That's
How many do?
That's humans. Chimps, 24 pairs. So when you undergo the now mitosis is cell division. What's the process called when you make your sperm and eggs? Meiosis. When meiosis happens, you end up with 23 chromosomes that have to match. When chimps do it, they end up with 12. Sorry, they have 48, not pairs. 23, 24. So there's one left over. That really causes bad effects. In fact, in most situations between species where that happens, even if they're closely related, they will not have viable offspring. And with humans and chimps, the chromosomes that are involved, you'll never get a viable embryo. It just cannot happen. That is why we separated. Is there the possibility that if a human had a different number of chromosomes, we have a variety of genetic diseases in which you can get an extra chromosome, like an extra human chromosome. Does anybody know of one? Down syndrome is probably the most famous one. People with Down syndrome are not necessarily infertile. Many of them are, but some are not. It is entirely possible if there was some sort of worldwide disaster and a bunch of people with Down syndrome were trapped in a small valley and they had to band together to survive. 5, 6 generations, you'd have humans with an extra chromosomes, and you probably, that's actually kind of useful. You just increase the number of DNA, the amount of genes haven't changed. Evolution would very quickly take care of all the regulation that's going incorrectly, and you probably have humans with now more possibilities and mutations of their DNA. That would be a interesting experiment. That would be entirely unethical to do. But a chimp where the genes have separated and they don't match properly and they're not even human, it's not going to happen. It does happen in a donkey and you get the mule is the product. Donkey and a horse. Mule comes out, the mule is always infertile, it has the wrong number of chromosomes, but you do get something. It's extremely rare for that to happen. The mule is used as an example because it is such a rarity where you get that. And the horse and the donkey are just close enough. They were bred separately. They are almost the same thing. They're much closer together than humans and chimps. So, normally chromosomes in each pair are identical, except for pair 23. Pair 23 is the mutated pair. because that is the XX or XY pair. Those are the sex chromosomes. Humans, and a fair number of mammals, use their chromosomes to determine your biological gender. It's not always the case. There's a variety of humans who are born with, for example, XY, and they grow up morphologically female. They have a genetic condition in which their cells do not respond to testosterone. So what makes your body grow female is the amount of testosterone and estrogen that you're exposed to, either way. And if you just don't react to the testosterone, you just grow up female. And so they usually find out when they try to have children, there's a really high infertility rate, but not always. And they're often referred to as hyperfemale, because since they don't respond to testosterone, regular human bodies that are genetically female do respond to the testosterone that's there. If you don't respond to it at all, you get exaggerated secondary female characteristics. Often their cheekbones are slightly higher, their hips are slightly wider, and all those secondary characteristics are exaggerated. There's a really high number of them in the modeling industry. But many of them who have it wouldn't even know, because if you're fertile, you're not ever going to do it. Well, nowadays, lots of people, now that I say that, nowadays when people do 23andMe, they're now finding out all sorts of things. Like, I thought that was my daddy. I just wait for 3-4 months after Christmas, all those people that bought 23andMe for other family members, and then the drama that happens. 23andMe is when you send your DNA in, and they will tell you everybody you're related to. And they'll tell you things like what parts of the world your genes came from. They'll say things like you're 23% Irish, which some of it's a little bit pseudoscience-y, some of it's not. And then people find things about their origin that perhaps people didn't want them to find out. It's reasonably accurate, yeah. There's a lot of biological determinism in it, so they'll tell you things like you have this % chance for heart disease. That doesn't mean you're going to get heart disease, but it does mean you happen to have the genes that are correlated with having a higher chance of heart disease, so you might want to change your diet. But sometimes what happens is people will say, oh, I have a higher chance of this. It is inevitable. I'm going to give you a worksheet now and some time for you to work on it, because we have done all the things you need to do to do it. You will have a quiz next week on the worksheet. However, first week back, during the quiz, you will get to have your worksheet with you. The questions on the quiz will not be identical, but if you can do the worksheet on your own, you'll find it fairly easy, or should, because you can use it to help you interpret the results or answers. That's just my way of ensuring that you've done the worksheet, you know the stuff, and you didn't just copy or ChatGPT it right through the end. Hold it, you said you made a DNA model last year?
We said in Meta we like draw it on a piece of paper and then we like cut it out.
Okay, so they didn't do the candy one.
No.
Okay, we'll do the candy one.
You know the first one? What does it stand for? Okay.
I usually say no. If I buy it separately and make sure it never goes into the lab, maybe. I'll have to talk to Miss Stewart.
What are you looking for?
And then we'd have to do it in here.
I don't know if that's spelled right correctly.
Sugar, phosphate, and nitrogen. Number 2? Where is that shit? You just didn't write it. It's sugar,
Relax.
sugar, phosphate, and nitrogen.
Everybody here knows about neverssl.com?
Yeah. No.
Anybody here not know about neverssl.com? If you find your internet's not working at Brentwood, if you're on your phone, shut off cellular before you do this. That way you know you're connected to the Brentwood internet. Type in neverssl.com. Never refers to that they will never implement security protocols. And that sounds like, oh, no, it's good. There's so many, you know that splash page when you have to re-sign in to Brentwood and say, oh, I agree to all this?
Yeah.
The security on some web pages says, oh, it's trying to redirect you, I'm gonna stop it. That's a pop-up. And so to be nice to you, it doesn't show you the thing you're supposed to go to sign in. So if you type in Never SSL, it's a web page that someone has made that is just unencrypted, normal HTTP that you can go to that's safe, that will then allow Brentwood to go, oh, redirect, sign in again. And your internet's not working just because you have to sign in again, but you're never getting notified because all the web pages you're going to are too secure. So if you're ever having internet problems, type that in. Literally 90% of the time it'll fix your problem. You just have to re-sign in. And the AP as in the place where you get the box, that's an AP right there. Directly above your heads in the middle of the classroom, that's providing you internet. In every building, they could be different. So you might have to sign in here, but that doesn't carry over into arts. And so all of a sudden you notice like in certain buildings, my internet doesn't connect. Well, it's just because you have to sign in there too. I don't know why it's not everywhere. That's a different question.
Is it Guami? Rest of Guami.
Okay, load. There we go. Sure.
No. That's me.
B. Password.
No,
Create. No, I should just.
Wait, is that right? Remember my house? Oh, no, sugar. Phosphate. Sugar.
I put the due date down as tomorrow. You don't have to hand it in. That is because later this week I'm going to post the answers so you can have a chance to check your work, because it would be kind of cruel to give you a quiz and you never had a chance to check. But I'm posting it. It will be up. I put the due date as tomorrow to remind you. Get it done before the answers come out, but if you get it done after the answers and then check, they'll be fine. Bring it to the quiz like normal. You're just going to staple it to your answer sheet before you hand it in. All the classes that I have tomorrow are about to freak out because they're going to say it's due tomorrow. And we haven't even had class yet. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yo, I need some help, man.
I thought it was
Area of Atlantic. That we should have. Everybody else should be here.
So that's good. Did you do good on your test?
What'd you get?
Oh my god, 79.
I thought it was.
Yeah, I know, but my parents want to take me out. I don't know. I must have done bad on the test or something. What's the rest of your if this is the base, that would be shit.
My master's, my math degree.
Mine's not.
And I had like, communication, everything else.
What do you have? The way I thought it's a presentation. You were my partner.
I did also,
Yeah.
you're like, bro, why did you try to memorize it?
I didn't, but like, if you get out of these pages, sounds like AI, you know, so.
No, I changed some words.
Okay, stop what you're doing. Stop. Stop. Stand up. It's first day back. You're not used to 80-minute classes. Shake your legs. You have a 5-minute break to go get a drink of water. Do whatever you need to do. Pull your bones. And then we're going to go back and we'll do some detailed notes. 5 minutes. Oh, you've been doing this the whole time without the paper? Oh! I'll see if I can. It's recording. No. Because I also have an app. I'm just trying to think. If I can, just send me an email and I would say that I'd remember to do it. But I know that sometimes students send me emails and then I get caught up and then the emails they just go. Here. Students. How is this organized? It's not alphabetical. Can I get it on here? External rec. Do you know your ID?
Like ID number?
Yeah.
Like this 1760.
Nope. Not your zip grade. Do you know your password but not your login name, like number? Or do you don't know both?
I don't know either.
Okay. It looks like I can't get it from the app.
It's okay.
I'll spend a few minutes fiddling around. But send me an email. I'll just send it to you. Quiz is going to be an answer sheet, tags, purchase info, that's not it. Oh, whoa. Where? Hold it. Where did everybody go? I'm glad I gave a 5-minute break if everybody had to go to that night.
So I have a life sciences exam.
And I believe you can change your access code if you want to change the password. But if you do, keep in mind I can see it. So if you make it the same as your banking password. Okay. Dun, dun. Okay, pull out your notes again, put away your assignment, slip it into your 3-ring binder, and turn to the next page. So, the first diagram is an idealized diagram showing the relative sizes of the chromosomes. We do literally order them. Well, actually, I'll ask you, how are these ordered? Like, why is chromosome 1, 1, and why is chromosome 22, 22? There's nothing natural on it that goes, oh, that's, how can you tell them apart? Yes?
Because of their size.
Their size. We literally put the biggest one first. So, when all you had was a microscope, that was the first way that they ordered the chromosomes, and you can tell them, if you look very closely, 9 and 10 apart, slightly by size. And so they go by size until you get to XY. They are mismatched by size. The X is longer. And contains more genes, so there's more information. This is why if you are genetically female, you are less likely to have certain genetic conditions because you have 2 shots to get a properly working gene. And if you are male, you only have that shot. A lot of the genes on the X on the Y. So this is quote unquote the male chromosome, in that if you're genetically male, you would have that. As I said, however, there are XY females, and all males also have an X, but that would be what they would refer to as the female, in quotes, chromosome. As we'll see when we do the genetics part, this is why color blindness is much, much higher in males than it is in females, because the genes that you require to be able to see color are here on the X chromosomes. If you have a mutation and you're male, well, then you have it. But if you're female and you have a mutation, you will have another copy. And if that copy doesn't have the mutation, then you have regular color vision. In fact, in a certain subset, depending on the mutation, there is evidence that you might have super color vision. Because regular color vision can differentiate between I don't know how many millions of shades. But if you have a mutated gene as well, that means some of your rods and or cones, I forget which one's color. Does anybody know which one's color? Rod or cone? In your rod? Is it rod? Some of your rods being mutated, although if you just had those, you'd lose your color sense. Having a mutated version gives you a slightly different sense, and that allows you to tell even more colors apart. So there are people out there with superhuman powers that can tell the difference between, I don't know, eggshell and swan white. I don't know. Yeah. People keep telling me taupe is a color, and it's not. It's just dirty white. Now, that's an idealized version. This is a prepared version. So if you were looking under the microscope at a cell undergoing mitosis, it doesn't look like this. They all line up in the center and they're randomly scattered around. But what you'll do is you would take a picture and you carefully arrange them. This is known as a karyotype. It is one of the ways that you can detect certain genetic diseases. If you have an extra chromosome, when a chromosome is extra long or missing a section, which can happen, it is an image. You'd literally take a picture and then you'd go like, take little sections of it and cut and paste all the images in a row to generate something like that. Nowadays you do it cutting and pasting on a computer. When I did it, the university didn't let us use the computer for that. We actually had to print out the pictures and literally cut them and paste them. It still worked. And you can see the X and the Y. In both of these examples we have genetic males so that we can show all the different types of chromosomes. And you can see that they are now arranged by size.
A female would be 2 X's?
So, female would be 2 X's. So, genetic male. There are other conditions too in which you can have like XXY and XXXXY that can have a variety of consequences. Sometimes they can have very little consequences. And you can have intersex and all sorts of things in terms of how that expresses in its biology afterwards. But in the regular case, X and Y are just 2 X's. What else do I want to say? Oh, right. Humans, if you are human, 23 pairs. Horse has 64. A donkey has 62. So what does a mule have? 63. So that is how many pairs? How many pairs is 64? 32. So this is 32 pairs. This is 31 pairs.
So how does the mule?
So how many pairs
31 and a half.
is missing? Like, it turns out that extra chromosome that it got from the horse with the donkey, they're close enough related that it didn't stop it from developing, but that's why the mule is infertile, completely infertile. You can't make 2 mules and get another mule. They just won't. With 63, it's one that is unpaired. And so it cannot undergo meiosis properly, and it doesn't have fertile eggs or sperm. In addition, we've actually found in other apes, because apes also have 24 pairs, we found in the human chromosome, I don't know if it's, I think it might be chromosome 3, where you can tell that 2 chromosomes merged together. And we can tell that, oh, in apes, it's this chromosome and that chromosome. So we can tell our genetic lineage from apes from that, because we can sequence it and see which genes are there and where the old centromere was. What's the centromere? Yeah, the center of the axis. There's going to be a lot of that terminology. You might as well do that first. So right in here, highlight that. That's the centromere. Now, I'm going to highlight all the words you should know. So essentially all of them. I mean, I highlighted a loop just because if you didn't know it was a loop, that's just a function of English. Chromatin, so you have the DNA double helix. It winds around some proteins known as histones. When I did my biochem at University of Victoria, my professor worked on histone 2B. That was his entire life's work, and that's all he did. One tiny protein out of here. It wraps around there. Those in turn get wrapped around, and this is chromatin. This is chromatin fiber, so it's all chromatin, but when it's in single lines like that, that wraps around even more, and then those wrap around to make the chromosomes. They're linked together here called a centromere, and then there's one more area that's not even on here that you should know, and that is these areas on the end. Let's make that a different color. Also not highlighted since I used that for words. Pen. These little ends. Does anybody know what those are called? Pardon?
Chromatin?
The chromatid is this whole thing, just this end. What is sort of this area on the tips? So we have the center and we have the tips. The tips is called the telomeres. And why is that important? As you age, enzymes clip the tips and your chromosomes get shorter. And the reason they think now that eventually you die of old age is that those tips have gotten clipped back so much. There's an area where it's junk DNA, it's not really coding for anything. They start working into the code and you start losing genes. And then you start losing your ability to function. Why would evolution, which is trying to keep you alive, kill you off? It's literally a time bomb.
So why you lose hair color?
A lot of effects will come out from that, yeah.
No, I don't have an answer, but how do you spell the
Telomeres? But can't you tell? It's T-E-L squiggle squiggle squiggle.
What type of squiggles are that?
There, oh, I spelled it wrong. What? I put another E in there. I'm glad I looked it up. I wonder if it's British or, yeah, French. See, telomere, disambiguation.
Yeah.
But they're the little tips. Yeah.
Does this mean that if we found a way to stop clipping, we would get immortal?
We have. There is, one of the longest lived animals in the world, not things like trees or tortoises. They have enzymes.
What?
Pardon? I don't actually know. I think jellyfish might just be like functionally immortal in that there's nothing that even breaks them down. But in tortoises and certain species, they do have enzymes that break them down, and they have evolved a completely separate set of enzymes that build them back up. So like it's in a war. And as long as that's in balance, the tortoise will live for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they asked the researcher the inevitable question, which would be, if you could synthesize, like make that enzyme, make the gene for that enzyme, and give yourself that, CRISPR's coming, you could give yourself, would you do it? And he's like, no, I would never do that. We do know that there is ways in your own body to repair it. You have apparently the enzymes to repair it, but we don't use them. And the reason he wouldn't is because you find them active in every single form of cancer. Cancer doesn't die. So you just might give yourself super cancer. Or you might be Deadpool, one of the two. Because then you give your super cancer and live forever. Yeah. But yeah, so he's like, there's more to it than just having the enzyme, but yeah. But again, the overall large question, why do you have a time bomb in your genes? Why is evolution trying to kill you? Not now.
Because you're not useful.
Kind of, yeah. What should you, by the time you're dying of old age, what should you have done? You've had kids. And if you don't die, what's going to happen?
There's no need for kids.
Well, you've had your kids, so in one, now again, this is not an ethics discussion, so I'm not saying having kids is good. Evolution is like an algorithm, like, I don't know, TikTok algorithms. If you make kids, evolution, you were just successful. It's like if you saw something on TikTok and it made you very angry and you stayed there, then it's just going to show you more videos that make you very angry. Like I had to delete my TikTok account like 4 times over the break because I'd stop and then someone would say something like, all chemicals are bad, buy this special water that isn't a chemical. And I'm like, oh, water is a chemical. And then I would just get more of those and I'd argue in the comments. It's an algorithm, it doesn't care. So I'm not saying this is good or bad, evolution doesn't care, but this is what it does. If you're still alive and your children are adults, what happens eventually? Pardon? Overpopulation. You're competing with your children.
Oh. For what?
Resources, food. I mean, if you want to inherit the world, your parents first have to die to give it to you. And so you're the best chance of success against genetic diseases, against diseases like bacteria and viruses, because you have a different genetic combination than your parents. So one of the reasons we have sexual reproduction is just to fight against disease. But if they stuck around, you will have fewer resources in addition to anything else. And so it's useful to just, you've done your job, now move on. If we could, as humans, like control our birth rate and decide like we want to repair that and live forever and we'll just have a lot fewer kids, sure. There's no particular magic in what evolution says we must do. We can do it all sorts of ways. That's just the way that evolution works. It has found that if you have an extremely long-lived creature, often they outcompete. Now, it doesn't work for turtles. Why? Why do turtles get such a long life? They're very solitary. There's not many of them. They have to have huge amounts of eggs just to get a few to survive. Most turtles die. So if there's one living forever just making more eggs, that works. It worked for turtles. It just didn't work for humans. We apparently have way too many kids. Now that's changed in the last little while. As infant mortality has dropped, humans have started to have less and less kids. If you do a statistical analysis, back in the days when infant mortality was quite high, most of human existence, to guarantee 2 surviving children to take care of you in your old age, guarantee, like 90% or above, you'd need to have about, 8 to 12 kids. Now, on average, 4 to 6 would survive, but to guarantee, like a really high level to make sure that you're not going to be left alone in your old age with nobody to take care of you, you needed to have a lot. Once infant mortality drops, then humans go, it's really expensive to send 12 kids to Brentwood, so we'll just have 2, because odds are we'll still have 2 in 10 years, so we don't have to worry about it. And that's happening worldwide. Birth rates are dropping mostly because parents can rely on the fact that their kids will still be alive, which has been a huge success. For the first time ever, they've predicted a decrease in population, I think in 2036, which would be good. Everybody in finance and economics says that that's bad, because economics and finance doesn't know how to deal with non-growth. But in terms of environment, resources, and everything else, that might be okay. Okay, in order to form chromosomes, DNA densely packed. So, number 1, DNA double helix. So this is wound across special proteins known as histones. Looped onto a protein scaffold. We're just going to color over what those proteins are. And that's where we get chromatin. That's condensed into a coil. We don't have a special name for it. It's just condensed. Into condensed chromatin. And then looped around and packed into a chromatid. Now, chromosome pair, oops, I did that wrong. Chromatid pair is a chromosome and I learned, I think last year, there was a particular belief that I'm going to dispel now because it made sense. You get this pair, you get one from your mom. So we're going to say that the blue one's from mom, just to defy expectations. The pink one's from your dad. One from your mom, one from your dad. That is not a chromosome. Those are 2 chromatids, one from your mom and one from your dad. When you have a chromosome, that's when it's undergoing something like either one of the phases of meiosis before it fully goes down, or mitosis. And so if you have a chromosome that looks like a butterfly, that's because it's been duplicated. And those are identical pairs. So this doesn't have one from your mom and one from your dad. You have an entirely separate one. Right? So I'm going to say, let's say this one is dad, that one is mom, this one is still all dad, this one is still mom. And if I was to do a dotted line down the middle, either side is identical. I found out last year some people thought that when you saw the butterfly one half, and it's not. That's just a part of mitosis when it's duplicating before it rips it apart. So the butterfly is just an artifact of mitosis. Normally your chromosomes are in this phase. There's a whole cell cycle before they divide and get active. One of the reasons you go bald, if you go bald, is because the cell cycle changes and you don't stop growing hair. You just shed it faster. In the same way, like, why don't you walk around, how many of you shave your eyebrows every day to keep them down to length? Yeah, you don't see people walking around with eyebrows like down to here, but you see hair down to here. Why are they different lengths? It's because it grows for a while, then the cell cycle says, stop growing it, and comes out, and then you just grow a new one. Now, some people may shave them down to get them to the right length, but you don't get like long. Same if you go bald, your hair doesn't stop growing. It just changed its cycle, and it just gets really short, and it just sheds all the time. And so when you're bald, it's not that you're not growing hair, it's just they decided, you should look like this now.
What makes the chromatids, like what makes them pairs? Is it just the length that, like...
The length is how we first identified them, but what makes them is that they have the same types of genes.
Oh, okay.
So they will. So in a particular one, these might both. This might have the gene from your dad, the gene for eye color, and your dad was brown-eyed, so it has brown-eyed genes in there. And this is from your mom, and it has blue-eyed genes on there. And then when they came together, brown is dominant, and you ended up with green eyes. Eye color is often used as an example of pure what's called Mendelian genetics. It's not. It is possible for you to have parents and then your eye color to come out what seems wrong. There are people who have accused and said, my dad's not my dad because if you have blue eyes and you have blue eyes, there's no way I should have brown eyes, which in simple Mendelian genetics would be true, but it turns out there are a couple of ways. They're rare-ish, but not that rare. There are some genes that correspond to exact Mendelian genetics, but blue eyes was thought to be one of them, and it's still often used as an example because it often does, but it's not perfect. So anything I tell you in class, you shouldn't go and immediately accuse your parents that because you found out this, that you're not genetically theirs. Although there are famous stories of students in classes all over the United States and Canada who, after genetics, have learned that, and then their parents say, yeah, we didn't tell you you were adopted. Sorry. Okay. We're going to write down all these details. One, DNA double helix. Did I hide them? Did I? What?
Is it like that one?
No, I hid this one. Nice. No, come on. Aha. 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 So each chromatid is identical, although it may look like you have two. That's just an artifact of cell division. We tend, famously, this is what we use to represent chromosomes, because that's most often the way we see them. Most of the time in your DNA, when you look at a nucleus under the microscope, it just looks dark. You don't see any chromosomes. They're not there. Because it's all as chromatin. It's just randomly unwound doing stuff. But in cell division, they collapse in and form the chromosomes. So the most common way that humans saw them under the microscope was in this phase just before they were ripped apart and divided. And so that became how we identified them, so that's how we represent them. But that's not the way DNA normally is. It's just how we see it with a microscope. Mm-hmm.
How come it wraps around the proteins?
To help pack it.
Oh.
In the same way, it took me a while to wrap my head around, literally in biochem class, because I was like, to my professor, it was like, okay, we have to pack all this DNA in. He's like, yes. And it wraps around protein, yes. Which takes up more room. He's like, no. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And his way of explaining it was thinking of it, you have to keep separate and pack a bunch of thread. It is far easier to take that thread and put it on a spool so that you can pack it concretely than if you just took all that thread as a big jumble and shoved it in a box. You actually would be able to pack less thread because you can wrap it tighter around the spool and it will take up less room. And so the histones acts as a spool to pack it in tightly. So it needs it in order to get it in there. Sorry. Anybody still ready? Okay. So we've got the helix, wraps around the spool, known as histones. Those loop onto a scaffold. I like how we tell you it's histones. We're not going to tell you what this is. It's just a scaffold. It's also another protein. DNA will then continue to twist, and it will get into. So this is a double helix already wrapped around. So it's wrapping around the wrapping around. That wrapping around and wrapping around eventually wraps into loops called chromosomes. That is all to get it packed in there. There's so many possibilities. DNA is the code. What's it code for? What does DNA make ultimately? What's its end goal? Proteins. Don't pack up. I heard a zipper. Somebody was trying to pack up. Did I misspell proteins? No. DNA sequences of hundreds of thousands of base pairs that contain instructions for a protein. So if you have a DNA sequence that makes one protein, what do we call it? Pattern is not bad. It is a code. What is the code that makes one thing? It is the whole thing's a DNA code. It's gene. So linking those, you already knew that, but that's what a gene is. A gene is just something that makes a protein. Why are your eyes blue? Because of your genes. Why are your eyes blue? Is because there's a protein in there that makes them blue. So all of your characteristics are due to particular proteins that are made.
Does that mean we only have 23 characteristics?
No, because a chromosome will contain thousands of genes. Hundreds? Thousands? We used to think, when we first discovered all this, that the more genes you had, the more complex you were as an organism. So obviously humans have the most genes. The onion, I think, just beats us by several thousand miles of genes. It is far better than we are. And it turns out the complexity of an organism doesn't necessarily have to do with how intelligent it is. Pass that around. We're almost done this section. And I keep hearing stuff in the paper anyway, so but might as well just in the last minute throw this into a binder. If you want to get started on it, you may. Since I gave you time in class to do the other one, so I'm going to give this one a head. Because your quiz will probably involve both of these. Late next. Because I mean, we have tutorials. We have a day to figure out that you need extra help. We do it Friday, but I always like doing it at the week after next week. So not Thursday, Friday. Normally our quiz days.
I'm gonna be on Isaac's team.
Thank you all. Enjoy your second